Consider the following scene. You're doing homework at your desk. The smell of food reaches your nose. Your mouth starts to water and your hunger pangs get stronger. You rise from your seat and wander in search of the source of the aroma. From a biological perspective, many of the events of this little story involve the functions of your nervous system. The working of the nervous system has several key stages. First, it detects stimuli in the environment such as the light that reaches your eye and the smell of food. It transmits signals between parts of the body, such as from the nose to the brain. The nervous system also integrates and processes information. For example, your brain integrates signals from the rest of the body into a perception of hunger. The nervous system activates appropriate responses in other parts of the body. For example, smelling delicious food can automatically trigger the secretion of more saliva in preparation for eating. We consciously decide to move toward the food. We also rely on the ability of our nervous system to coordinate complex movements like walking. The diverse parts of an animal body are like the many members of a complex community. In order to function optimally, the parts must act together for the benefit of the whole. The nervous system helps animals coordinate the activities of their cells, tissues, and organs rapidly and precisely over the entire body. It acts as the body's communication wiring. Some components sense the environment. Other parts send signals across long distances. Still others issue commands for particular actions to be carried out. In many cases, a central headquarters integrates incoming signals and makes decisions to benefit the whole organism. In this activity, we'll begin with a look at the general features of nervous systems and their organization. Then we'll consider the division of labor between peripheral and central nervous systems. Finally, we'll examine the role of sensory reception in the nervous system. The principal cell of the nervous system is the nerve cell, or neuron. Neurons pervade the tissues and organs of an animal. Neurons have distinctive projections extending from the cell body. A neuron communicates with other cells by means of these projections. Neurons vary in structure depending on their function and location in the body. But most neurons have a long projection called an axon, extending away from the cell body. The axon of a neuron carries the cell's electrical signal, which is generated by the flow of ions across the neuron's plasma membrane. In vertebrates and most invertebrates, adjacent neurons communicate using signaling molecules that travel across a narrow gap between the cells. The other important cells of the nervous system support, protect, and nourish the neurons. These are glial cells, or glia. An individual neuron transmits its electrical signal, or impulse, in one direction. The starting point for the signal is a sensory receptor, a cell specialized to detect stimuli. The signal may travel through one or more neurons before reaching its destination, where a particular action occurs. The cells that produce an action in response to a nerve cell impulse are called effectors. Effectors include muscle cells, which produce movement, and gland cells, which secrete substances required for bodily functions. Neurons may associate in a variety of ways. A single neuron may receive signals from many other neurons. In that way, it serves to integrate the signals it receives. An impulse from one neuron may either stimulate or inhibit the firing of another. The firing of one neuron may require signals from several other neurons. A group of neurons may be associated in a bundle with their axons arranged in parallel like a cable wrapped in connective tissue. This structure is a nerve. Groups of neurons may also occur in clusters called ganglia that include their cell bodies. A ganglion coordinates neural impulses within a functional region of the animal. Almost all animals have a nervous system, but the organization of neurons varies in different phylogenetic groups. The structure of the nervous system is an adaptation for the body plan and lifestyle of the particular species. The simplest type of nervous system is the nerve net. It consists of a uniform network of neurons extending throughout the body. Some cnidarians, such as the hydra, have a nerve net. Although this nervous system is simple, it still allows the hydra to coordinate movements. It can push food into its mouth with its tentacles, and it can move by somersaulting. Echinoderms, like sea stars, coordinate their bodies with the help of radial nerves in their arms, as well as a central nerve ring. These structures facilitate communication between distant parts of the body. The nervous systems of most bilateral animals have varying degrees of centralization. In general, one or more nerve cords extend the length of the animal's body. This is apparent in the animals shown here: a flatworm, an arthropod, and a vertebrate. Bilateral animals often have large ganglia or a brain at the leading end of the nerve cord. This is a characteristic of animals that are cephalized. They have a head. Nerve tissue is concentrated near the sensing and feeding organs, which encounter the most important stimuli in the environment first. The rapid and efficient processing of these stimuli benefits the animal. The centrally located structures of complex nervous systems, like nerve cords and brains, are referred to as the central nervous system, or CNS. This part of the nervous system is responsible for integrating and processing signals from the rest of the nervous system and sending out coordinated and appropriate response signals. The neurons lying outside the central nervous system make up the peripheral nervous system. This part of the nervous system communicates between the central nervous system and sensory receptors and effectors. Humans and other vertebrates have some of the most complex nervous systems in the animal kingdom, with distinct roles for their peripheral and central parts. Next, we'll examine peripheral and central nervous systems in turn, focusing on the special characteristics of each. The peripheral and central nervous systems of vertebrates are highly integrated. One can't function without the other. The role of the peripheral nervous system is to conduct impulses between the central nervous system and the sensory receptors and effectors scattered throughout the body. In humans, the major signaling highways of the peripheral nervous system are the cranial and spinal nerves. 12 pairs of cranial nerves connect directly to the brain. 31 pairs of spinal nerves arise from different points along the spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system extends further, beyond these nerves, to virtually every part of the body. Remember that nerves are bundles of parallel axons, and that each axon belongs to a different neuron. Some axons within a particular nerve may conduct impulses toward the central nervous system, while others conduct impulses away from it. A few nerves carry signals in only one direction. Thus, nerves may function as either one-way or two-way passages. But each neuron within a nerve conveys signals in only one direction. The neurons of the peripheral nervous system may be classified into two functional categories, depending on the direction of the signals they carry. The sensory division includes neurons that conduct impulses from sensory receptors to the central nervous system. The motor division encompasses neurons that transmit signals from the central nervous system to effectors, such as muscle cells. Sensory neurons not only transmit signals we consciously perceive as sensations such as the smell of food, they also monitor conditions within our body that are important for physiological regulation and for maintaining homeostasis, such as blood pressure and blood oxygen level. We don't become consciously aware of this sensory information. Neurons of the motor division can be classified into two groups depending on the category of effector they stimulate. These subdivisions are known as the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. Motor neurons of the somatic nervous system stimulate skeletal muscles. They control the movement of the limbs, torso, and head. Most of these neurons are under our voluntary conscious control, but some movements they induce are involuntary. An example of this is the knee-jerk reflex. The neural circuit for this reflex extends from stretch receptors, stimulated by a tap on the knee, through the spinal cord, to motor neurons, and finally to the muscle cells that move the leg. The circuit doesn't travel through the brain, so the act is not under conscious control. Motor neurons of the autonomic nervous system control the activities of glands, muscles, and other effector cells associated with internal organs, such as the heart, stomach, and kidneys. See if you can identify the part of the motor division of the peripheral nervous system illustrated on the screen. Drag the correct label to its proper place under the image, then click Submit. Submit. Sorry, that's not the best answer. The rapid withdrawal of your hand from a hot object is a reflex action involving the somatic nervous system, like the knee-jerk reflex. The autonomic nervous system is responsible for the involuntary release of digestive fluids. The peripheral nervous system of humans and other vertebrates requires a powerful centralized system to coordinate its signals. We'll look at that system, the central nervous system, next. The activities of the nervous system are controlled and coordinated by the central nervous system. In humans and other vertebrates, the central nervous system consists of the brain and spinal cord. These vital structures are protected by the brain case and vertebrae. They're also surrounded by protective layers of connective tissue called meninges, and by a special cushioning fluid called cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF. The spinal cord serves as the major pathway of communication between the spinal nerves and the brain. It also coordinates some simple sensory motor circuits, like reflex actions. The central nervous system contains extended tracts of parallel axons, something like nerves, along which impulses are conveyed. This nerve tissue has a whitish color and is called white matter. Regions of the central nervous system where many nerve cell bodies exist are usually the sites of signal, integration, and processing. This nerve tissue is grayish in color and is called gray matter. The gray matter of the spinal cord is concentrated at its core. The brain is perhaps the most complex system known to science. Made up of billions of interconnecting neurons, it is the seat of our thoughts, memories, and complex behaviors. In the vertebrate embryo, the brain arises from 3 enlarged regions at the anterior end of the nerve cord. The forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain develop to varying degrees in different groups of vertebrates. In many mammals, particularly in humans, the front end of the forebrain becomes quite large and elaborate. It develops into the largest and most complex part of the human brain, the cerebrum. The cerebrum, like the rest of the brain, is divided into right and left hemispheres. The outer surface of the cerebrum is the cerebral cortex, the brain structure associated with the most advanced human behaviors and mental abilities. Its regions are specialized for particular cognitive tasks and sense processing functions. The thalamus and hypothalamus develop from another part of the forebrain. The thalamus is a processing center for signals traveling between the cerebrum and the peripheral nervous system. The hypothalamus is critically important for physiological regulation and the maintenance of homeostasis. Several important brain structures develop from the hindbrain. The cerebellum is responsible for coordinating movements of the body. The pons and medulla oblongata, together with the midbrain, form the brainstem, a thick stalk at the juncture of the brain and spinal cord. The pons and medulla oblongata control autonomic functions such as breathing and heartbeat. The midbrain has a critical role in the processing of sensory information. We've surveyed the parts of the nervous system that conduct and process signals generated by sensory receptors and that send commands to effectors. Now let's take a look at the biology of sensory reception. We've all heard of the 5 senses: sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. In considering sensory reception from the perspective of the nervous system, we need to examine what's happening at the cellular level. Sensory reception begins with specialized cells called sensory receptors. A sensory receptor is a neuron or epithelial cell that generates an electrical impulse in response to a sensory stimulus. When appropriately stimulated, ion channels within the sensory receptor cell's membrane become altered. That changes the flow of ions across the membrane, and therefore the membrane's electrical potential. The resulting impulse is transmitted from the sensory receptor to the neuron it contacts, and from there it propagates into the nervous system. A sensory receptor cell can be classified according to the type of stimulus that activates it. Let's consider some of them. Mechanoreceptors respond to mechanical stimuli, such as changes in pressure or vibrations like sound waves. A mechanical deformation of the mechanoreceptor's membrane triggers the change in its electrical potential. Mechanoreceptors are distributed throughout the skin and are largely responsible for what we call the sense of touch. The hair cells of the inner ear are also mechanoreceptors. Sound waves funneled into the ear bend the hair-like projections extending from these cells, triggering an electrical impulse. Chemoreceptors are the basis for our senses of smell and taste. A chemoreceptor becomes stimulated when a particular smell or taste molecule binds to its particular receptor protein. Binding activates the receptor protein, leading to a change in electrical potential and the generation of an impulse. The detection of light and the sense of vision in animals with eyes depends on photoreceptors. These sensory receptor cells have membrane proteins with light-absorbing pigment molecules attached. When light is absorbed by the pigment, the protein molecule becomes altered. The altered protein initiates events within the cell that lead to a change in the cell's membrane potential, and an impulse is generated. The signals conveyed to the nervous system by sensory receptors can be refined by sense organs, the anatomical structures that contain these cells. The variety of eyes to be found in the animal kingdom is a good example. But the information produced by sensory receptors is of no use until it is processed by the nervous system. It's not so much a photoreceptor or eye that sees, but the brain. Sensation, and our body's response to it, requires the integrated operation of the entire nervous system, including the brain's powerful information processing ability. The nervous system is the body's communication wiring. Electrical signals are sent through neurons, the cells that connect to form the circuits of the nervous system that extend throughout an animal's body. The diverse parts of an animal body are like the many members of a complex community. The nervous system serves to link those parts with a rapid communication system, just as a community of people can be linked by telephones and the Internet. Neurons are organized differently across the animal kingdom in ways that suit the body plan and lifestyle of a given animal. Bilateral animals have shown an increasing trend towards centralization of the nervous system, culminating in the vertebrates. The brain and spinal cord are the headquarters of the vertebrate nervous system. These structures constitute the central nervous system, which processes sensory information and sends out commands to effectors throughout the body. The human brain is astonishingly complex, with many parts carrying out distinct roles. The peripheral nervous system conducts messages to and from the central nervous system. It has a sensory division, the neurons of which carry information from sensory receptors, and a motor division, which conveys signals to effectors. Much of the activity of the peripheral nervous system occurs without conscious awareness. Sensory receptors are cells that generate input to the nervous system. They react to stimuli by generating an electrical impulse, which is conveyed to a neuron and transmitted to the nervous system. Sensory receptors can be categorized by the type of stimulus that activates them. The nervous systems of humans and other animals are finely honed products of evolution. The ability of an animal to move rapidly, respond appropriately to its environment, and coordinate the internal activities of an intricate body is due to its high-speed communication network. The human nervous system, with its powerful brain, has enabled us to progress beyond our survival needs, to become a dominant force on the planet, and to understand our own inner workings.